I was talking to my next guest about the evolution of our careers. We both started coaching about the same time. We coach in corporate. We both do a lot of the same things, talk about the same things. We were just comparing our books and how so much of what we talk about is similar. One of the things I said to Shelley Paxton, who is going to be our next guest, was that there's a lot of coaches who will coach you to follow your dreams, follow your heart, leave the corporate world, start something on your own. I'm not that coach. I used to be that coach. I'm that guy. I left corporate and did, and I'm doing something different. But I primarily work with people who are staying in corporate, who like the benefits of working for a bigger company, like someone else paying for their healthcare and their American Express, which when you're an entrepreneur, that's kind of a scary thing that you have to take on. But how do you thrive in those jobs? How do you not let that be soul crushing, but how do you actually use it so that you can be the best person you can be and thrive in those and environments? And Shelley just lit up like a Christmas tree. And she said, "Oh my God, Mark, let's talk about this on the podcast." She says, "My focus is boiled down to I quit so you don't have to." She quit corporate so you don't have to. She's using, so in her note to me, she said, Mark, we'll talk about insights and concepts and tools that I wish I knew when I was back in corporate. And we're going to make it so that success feels energizing, not exhausting." I'm like, Shelley, dude, that's exactly what I want to talk about on the podcast. And I'm making her just sit here and smile while I just talk too much about her. Officially, she is the former chief marketing officer of Harley Davidson. She found herself at the top of the mountain, feeling success, but empty. And she wanted to feel something different. Something awakened inside of her that led her to a profound journey that became her mission and business. And she published a book called Soulbatical, A Corporate Rebel's Guide to Finding Your Best Life. She was on the podcast years ago when that book came out, talking about that. She has her own podcast talking about that. Meanwhile, she works with companies like McDonald's and Visa and Intel and all kinds of stuff to help people become a badass in the corporate world. And now she's here with us. Shelley, thanks for being on the podcast.
Oh, any day and every day, soul brother. Thank you. And thank you for having me again. It's a rare treat and I'm honored.
I don't. Yeah. Again, I don't know what I would do without you. You helped launch Only Tens 2.0 and interviewing me on the podcast. You gave me a blurb for the Rising Leader Handbook, and you've just been supportive of my career in the whole entire time. So I totally appreciate you. I'm curious, like you've been traveling the world. I've been watching you. You went from corporate. You started your coaching business, your consulting business. You wrote Soulbatical. You've been talking about it, and then you've been evolving as you went along. How did you come to, this whole thing? Because that we're sharing, that we're kindred spirits in how to help people thrive in the corporate world.
Yeah, it happened as things do very organically, right? So, it's a reminder to all of us that we can't like over engineer these things in our lives. We have to get curious and pay attention. And as I was getting curious and paying attention, as I was seeing how my language, my book, my story was being received in the world, I started to pick up on this idea that people were really leaning in and they were kind of terrified of this word soulbatical. And especially people who hire me to stand on stages, who hire me to coach executives. I do more speaking than coaching these days, but either way. And I realized I finally had somebody come to me and have the brave conversation. And you talk about this all the time. Like our journey as leaders is to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations. And this conversation was such a gift. It radically shifted my work because this woman who was putting on a massive event that I was the opening keynote for, she said to me, Shelley, I said, what does success look like on the other side of this? Me standing on stage talking to 1,000 female executives, and she said that they don't want to quit their
Mm.
jobs. And Mark, it landed. I felt it in every cell in my body. And I went, oh my God, that's what people think I'm saying. because sabbatical sounds so much like
Right.
sabbatical. And honestly, when I created the mashup of soul and sabbatical, I did think it meant leaving your job. And now, 7 years later, I see so clearly that I've been on this unique journey so that I can share back what I wish I knew in the seat of a leader, of an executive, of somebody in the C-suite like I was at Harley Davidson. And it just, I mean, it lit me up and it gave me all of the energy to go, that's the focus of my work. And I know for
Mm.
sure that will inform the next book as well.
It's interesting because I came to the same thing. When I became a coach, most of my clients were people who were leaving a job or were entrepreneurs, trying on a journey, and I was helping them with that soul level, genius level thing. But my business started to shift naturally towards people who were in the C-suite, people who were, and they're like, Mark, I'm not following my dreams. This is what I want to do. I like making money. I like leading a group of people. I like doing this. And it shifted my focus on, and the beginning of the Rising Leader Handbook is like, you don't have to go, jump out of an airplane to feel alive. Just have a difficult conversation. And our mutual friend Helen Appleby also was finding the same thing, is that women in corporate who were really reaching heights in corporate world were starting to hit ceilings, starting to hit all the pushback of them being in leadership positions and then choosing to leave. and the
Yes.
and the conversations people were having with her about her next book and what her next focus was is, how do you have these women actually stay, because they need to be in the workplace, they need to be in leadership positions, they need to be on boards, so all three of us are having the same conversation, is how do we actually make the corporate world a thriving, vibrant place where people can grow. So
Yes. Yes. Can I add on to that?
that's why you're
That
here.
100, yeah, thank you for the reminder. 100%. Like I want to stand, like I'm having a hard time even sitting in my seat right now because I feel so much energy
Yeah, our
around this.
energy, by the way, when we get together is like the people sitting and listening to us are like, okay, let's turn this down a little bit. But you and I get so
Yeah.
excited and talk.
Oh, I'll try it. We'll settle into it. But I'm
Yeah.
I'm hoping that it gets others energized. That really is, you said this in the intro in talking about who I am, but I so clearly see now my work, your work, Helen's work, so many of us, and there's room for more of us. I truly believe, like, let's get more of us saying this because we will have the ripples of impact the more we are showing up and sharing that there is a way to find success that feels more energizing and less exhausting. And the way I like to talk about it is, let's all start stepping into this idea of redefining success that celebrates our humanity, our well being, and our soul. How beautiful would that be, right? You can imagine the impact and the ripples that
Right.
emanate from more leaders showing up. Culture inside the corporation and culture at large has to shift as a result of us making those choices.
Yeah. So let's make it really real. Why do you think that having a job and being a cog in the wheel, even if you're really high up on the wheel, why do you think it seems to be soul crushing and de-energizing?
Well, I think so because a lot of it was created around a success script that does not serve most. It is not a one size fits all. So, this kind of idea that we do our work in a certain way, this celebration of busyness as a badge of honor, of hustle and grind, of always on, all of these things that I think became part and parcel of our culture, and especially corporate culture over the past few decades. I mean, that's why I think it's gotten, and certainly I felt some of that, not only at Harley, but in my, long advertising and marketing career before that. I was in the corporate space for 26 years. And believe me, I don't regret a second of it. But I can look back and see so clearly how I was living someone else's success script.
Mm,
And that script was written in a way that doesn't benefit, for example, the working mom who's also in the C-suite, right? Or a modern family or somebody, right? It doesn't benefit those of us that are putting our health first, because if we don't have our health, we don't have anything.
right.
So for me, I think corporate has gotten this soul crushing moniker and reputation because we're operating off a really outdated script. So my invitation is, let's co-create this new script together.
I'll tell you, I think the robust job market here in the U.S. and I talked to a couple of clients in a couple of other countries, and they're having the same thing happen. Is that corporate leadership is finding that they have to actually lead in the ways we've been talking about for the last 20 years with empathy, right? Lead individual people, see what they need in order to be successful, because the job market is so competitive right now, that they're forced to actually care about their people. It's kind of cool. But, the culture, you're talking about the culture piece. I was just talking to a client yesterday, and he's gotten his new team working like a top. He's gotten his home life is good. We've just handled everything was handled on the ducker, but he was still talking to me as if he was like completely overwhelmed and
Mm.
miserable. And I said, dude, like, I don't understand what am I missing here? Because I don't understand what your demeanor is. This was taken off your plate. This is all handled, and you're still. He goes, oh, he goes, it's kind of like showing your cards. He said, it doesn't, I can't let people see that I'm actually happy in my job, that I actually have everything handled, because they'll think I'm not busy. They think I'm right. And I said, I got it. The currency of that culture is, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed, right? And if you're going to stick out like a sore thumb, so we're working on how he's going to lead that effort in changing the culture, but he can't just drop it, right? So what you're
Yeah.
talking about is just permeates everything.
Well, and I want to pick up on the word you just said, currency. It's so powerful. And in my current keynote and a lot of my work, what I talk about is redefining our success currency. How do I want to feel at the
No,
end of every day? Success is a feeling, not a checklist. And that is a lesson I had to learn the hard way.
I'm going to slow you
So,
down on that. I'm going to slow
yeah.
you down on that, because that's not a pithy saying. uh we talk, in coaching 101, we say you don't want the big house, you want how the big house is going to make you feel, right? You don't want the new partner, you want to feel a certain way. How can you get that before you get the big house? How can you get that before you're in a relationship? So what you're saying is, we'll apply that to what you're saying, and I hate to dumb it down, but I got to dumb it down. Because we chase those things because we think it's going to make us feel that way. It doesn't make us feel that way, so we chase harder because we must not be doing it right to feel that way. Am I close?
Yeah, very much so. And I don't think it's dumbing it down. I love that you're slowing it down.
Mhm.
I don't think that you're dumbing it down. I mean, because we're so conditioned. I mean, that's the word that keeps coming up for me again and again. We have been, so many of us, and I'll speak for myself, have been conditioned that success looks a certain way and then ultimately becomes this checklist, and it divorces us completely from our own truth and essence and values. It divorces us from what's inside. And you talk about this in your book, right? We're chasing, I say, validation over values. We chase the validation instead of acknowledging the values and letting our own values, what's inside of us, what is our truth, guide us. And so when we flip it inside out and we start to look at success through the lens of my truth, my values, my deepest desires, and how I want to feel, it starts to shift the script and we start to call bullshit on some of the stuff we've been chasing.
That's such a huge. Gary Ridge, who is the former CEO of WD-40, was on the podcast, and he talked about how the way he leads is he sets the values of the company, makes sure everybody understands the values of the company, and says you can make whatever decision you need to make as long as it's within the values of the company. As long as you understand those values, I don't believe you'll make a wrong decision. Turn that around to what you just said. How when you're talking to someone and you ask them about their values, how surprised are they? Like, have they ever sat down and actually sat down and said, what do I actually value in life? What do I actually care about? And I can't tell you how many people are like, ooh, never thought of that. uh,
Yes. Well, actually, and what ends up happening, and I will say I'm guilty of this as well. I had to do this work when I left Harley and I really started getting honest with myself. I think my journey over the past 7 years since leaving Harley has been one of being honest with myself about what matters most to me, about what my values are, about what my truth is. And I think that goes for all of us. One of my favorite questions is, what are you pretending not to know? And I think some of us are not truly knowing our values. Or maybe it's like, oh, yeah, I can give you a list of 20 things, 20 values. And what I do with people in workshops, retreats, one on one, sometimes even from the stage, I will say, here's Brene Brown's Dare to Lead list of values. And you can download, Mark, I'll give you the link to this, put it in the show notes.
okay.
I invite everyone listening to do this if you haven't done this work. Brene has 100 and some words on a piece of paper that are potential values. The real work, the real challenge is going from 15, which is pretty easy for all of us to go, yeah, there are 15 on this list. Yeah, that's about right. That's kind of what guides my life. Then to 10, to 5, and the excruciating but game-changing and life-changing work is to get to your top 3.
Mm.
And that changed my world. And I do that work with so many. So when you ask that question, like how many of us have done this? Not many. And it really, when you are, and I learned this from Brene. I learned directly from her. I went through her Dare to Lead training years ago. And it floored me when I realized that I had never really sat down and done that work. And my 3 are freedom, authenticity, and courage. And when I see that on a piece of paper now, it's like well, duh, of course it is. But that's because I am creating my life in service of those values now. I didn't understand that then. So it's a fun one to play with as well. But that work, I mean, if you're looking for one practical tip and a place to start, I would say there. Choose your values over that external validation and use that Brene Brown list to come to terms with what your values are. It's a beautiful
We'll
lens.
totally put that in the show notes because I've done so much of this work and I can't come down to my 3. I think two of my 3 are connection and honesty. So honesty and authenticity, but I think that's the same thing for me. So now you got me off thinking about that. So what other tool? What again? It's so threatening to to actually, if you're the breadwinner, if you're, if you're really attached to your job, or or if you're in a marriage, and it's really threatening to say, is this really what I want? Is this how I want it? Right? It doesn't, if you're like thinking about your marriage, is this what I want? It doesn't mean you have to leave your marriage. It means, do I want it this way? Are there conversations I need to have? Are there something that I want to change? Same thing for your job. If like, do I want that? Doesn't mean you have to quit. So what tools do you have for people to help them start to add energy to their careers?
I love this, and I want to bring this back to something that you wrote in your most recent book, which I don't remember exactly what my blurb is, but I'm going to say the version of it that's coming from my soul right now. Mark J. Silverman, this is the book I wish I would have had decades ago as a leader. So thank you. And in my current position as an entrepreneur, I'm still a leader, of course, as an entrepreneur, rereading and reading and relearning and putting into practice some of this has been powerful, and it validated some of the work and some of what I stand for. And one of the things, I'm going to answer your question this way. I just flipped to, there's this is in the final chapter on leading you, and you ask, who do I need to be to have that impact? So, right, we're talking about showing up as our best selves. And I love that you say, I don't wake up as Mark J. Silverman.
Oh yeah.
I create. That is one of my favorite lines in your whole book, because I thought, oh God, that's so true. It's why we have whatever fuels our soul, whatever we need when we wake up, like make sure you prioritize that. So I want to talk about the tool I use in order to show up as my most powerful, badass self every day. So one of the other, I guess, distinctions or choices I make. So one of the choices I make is values over validation. Another choice I make every day, and I invite everyone to use this, is permission over pleasing. So if
Yeah, you
you
have to
are,
explain. I
yeah,
explain it to me because I don't even understand it.
I will. I will. So we give ourselves permission instead of defaulting to what many of us have been conditioned to do, which is people pleasing.
Mm.
Again, permission internal, pleasing external. So it's another kind of internal external distinction that I've made for myself that I share with other leaders. So here's how I put that into practice. So I'm reminding myself of my power every day. So I love the color orange. I'm holding up orange Post-it notes. Choose your favorite color, whatever makes you smile, whatever makes you feel bold and brave and the best version of yourself. These are sitting all over my house, and I call them my permission slips. I don't even call them Post-it notes anymore. And what I do is I go every morning or before a big talk or a meeting or maybe even a really trying situation or potentially stressful situation, I ask myself, what do I need to allow myself to do, not do, and or feel in order to show up as my most powerful self, as my
Repeat that
best
for me. Repeat
self?
that for me. What? Do,
What do I need to allow myself or give myself permission to do, not do, and or feel
oh,
in order to show up as my most powerful self? And then write one or 10 or however many of these that you need. And I often have them all over my workspace and on my refrigerator and on my bathroom mirror. Those are my favorite places to put my permission slips. But that's my version of what so much of what you're talking about in the book is give ourselves permission. So sometimes for me, I'll show up and I'll be like, it has been a week. I need permission to rest. I'm going to create more space in my day. I give myself permission to create more space in
mm,
my day. I'm going to say no to a couple things that truly aren't tens for me. For example, or I'm going to give myself permission to take the afternoon and go wander because I need creative
mhm.
inspiration. I need to get
Whoever gives
away from
themselves permission for
devices.
that one, right? To
No
just walk
one,
around. I notice
right?
when I'm in a mall or when I'm somewhere and I'm just walking around for something, like I just love that. Nobody ever gives themselves time permission to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be as micro as macro. I mean, sometimes the feel part is really important too, because I think we try to stuff our feelings down
Mhm,
and ignore it. It's like, especially if we're going through cycles of grief, which are never ending, and one of those waves is coming over you, and you go, I give myself permission to feel sad. I give myself permission to be in this grief in this moment, right? We sometimes it's simply acknowledging and checking in and saying, this is where I am right now, and that's okay. So it's really that whole spectrum, but I have found this to be probably the most powerful tool I use every day.
it's such a way of being your own friend, of being on your own side. I've said that to people and not had instructions on how to be on your own side. These feel like instructions. You give yourself permission, is like the kindest thing you can do to yourself. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, give yourself permission. And believe me, I mean, I'm human, you're human, we're all human, every single one of us in this dialogue, listening to this conversation. So I have days, and honestly, I was having more days where I was just beating myself up, and I was like, what is going on here? So as I got more curious about that, I realized that it was so much of the pleasing and the conditioning that was driving me. And I wanted to find a way to release it, to acknowledge it, to be with it, and then to shift the narrative around it. And so these permission slips became my way of doing it. There's one other choice that feels really appropriate to share, because I think about this often as I reflect back on my years in the corporate world. And the choice or the distinction that I've created is that we choose pause over push.
Okay,
So
go, keep going.
yeah, I'll elaborate. So this one gets back to when you asked the question about why can corporate feel so soul-sucking in the earlier part of this conversation. And I said, busyness as a badge of honor, always on, hustle and grind. So much of this narrative is still very prevalent in our culture. And yes, there are a lot of us who are stepping up and showing up in more powerful ways. You've written books on it. You are helping your clients do that. I am trying to do the same. But we still live in this place where I think push is emphasized over pause. And what I realized is this word sabbatical. I was like, oh, not only does it not mean leave your job, it doesn't mean you have to take a year off or 6 months or 3 months off either. What it means is take a beat.
Mhm.
Live in a way that feels, more authentic, more courageous, more fulfilling, more energizing. And sometimes the thing we forget to do when we get caught up in the madness of it all is we forget to pause, to take that moment. Maybe it's 10 minutes every morning. Maybe it's a long weekend every month or every quarter, whatever it is for you. I'm not here to prescribe what it looks like. What I'm here is to share that this is a game
Mm.
changer when we remember to choose pause over push, because this is where I truly believe I will go to my grave saying this, that pausing is a prerequisite for us showing up as creative, innovative, powerful leaders who can create the impact we're looking to have in the world.
Mm.
Period.
I think that's brilliant, and it can be as micro as just in a conversation, because there's choice in a pause. If you pause, you can respond rather than react.
Yeah.
If you're reacting, there's no time for choice. There's only automatic everything. So, and the automatic is almost always push. So when you pause, now you're a choice in a conversation, in every situation in your life. I love that. That's amazing. So the last thing I want you to just kind of define, because it's one of my favorite things on earth, is, and then we're going to close the show, but just reiterate rebelling against and
Yeah.
rebelling for, because it's such a profound shift in showing up.
Yes, and it has everything to do with the energy that we've been talking about and the energy that you and I have in our work, in our lives, in this conversation. And so so tiny bit of background for everybody listening. If you didn't hear our first conversation, I have always identified as a rebel. And so when I was younger, I was definitely rebelling against my parents and religion and authority and pretty much anything anybody told me to do. I was just like, ain't gonna happen. I'm gonna do it my own way. And the profound epiphany that I had when I left Harley and I went on this deep journey of deep soul connection and understanding myself that I called my soulbatical. I started to understand that actually the real power and the real energy in showing up in the world and in creating what you want is in rebelling for. Because against is constricting, it's exhausting, it's playing on someone else's terms. And rebelling for is energizing, it's empowering, it is literally forward momentum. You're
It's
leaning into something, right?
creative. It's
It's
creative.
creative and creating. And so when you are rebelling for, the way I talk about it is rebelling for who you are, what you want, and the impact you want to have in the world. So in essence, it's rebelling for what matters most to you. And you get to do that in the context of your leadership. Well, I was going to say your leadership and your life. I view those as one and the same. We are one human. They are not separate. So you get to do this in your life and in how you show up in every facet of your life. Get really clear and then lean in, rebel for. And you said, Mark, in your book that our triggers, I don't have the page open, but basically our triggers are leaks of power. And I was like, oh my God, yes, that is against when we get triggered and we start thinking
Mhm.
about, well, it should look like this, it should be this. I always say in my work, release the shackles of should, right? And we get to do that in favor of what we want to rebel for, what we want to create in this world, the impact we want to have, how we want to define success, what our currency is, all of that yummy stuff. That's where energy comes from. That's where power and impact come from.
Nice. I love that. That's a beautiful way to close. Shelley, if people want to get more of you, they just need absolutely more. Besides going back to our first conversation, where can they find you?
Yeah, shelleypaxton.com is my website. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Shelley Paxton with an EY on LinkedIn. You can also find me as at Soulbatical with 2 B's on Instagram. But really, I love LinkedIn. You can find everything about me, my speaking, my books, all the things on my website. So let's keep it easy.
Okay, I'll put all of that in the show notes, and that way nobody has to remember any of that while they're driving. Shelley, I love getting a chance to spend time with you. We spend more time on a microphone together though than we get because we're just in so many different directions. That this is amazing that we get to connect. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being you and offering so much wisdom to the world.
To everybody else, sometimes on this podcast, you get to see what my world is and the friends and the support that I have in my life. I am probably the most blessed man on the face of the planet to have people like Shelley in my life. For you, please take it easy. Rebel for. Remember to pause, take care of yourself, be energized. I love you a ton. Have a great rest of the day.